Hey, what's up? Greetings, everybody. Pleasure to have each and every one of you here today. My name is Tyler Adolfo, and in this live stream, I'm essentially just going to be discussing life lately. There's been a lot that's been occupying my mind lately, and I figured I would do a live stream again. It's been some time since I've done one, and they've been successful on the channel in the past. And what better way to vent and get across some thoughts that are disseminating through my mind by sharing them with the world, broadcasting them to the world to get other people's insights and thoughts, and to also get in touch with you all and see what's going on with yourselves. I'm all ears. Lay it out on me. I'm happy to hear what each and every one has to say. If you don't want to share, that's totally fine. I do have some particular things I want to talk about in this video. And I guess as a starter, what I'll draw your attention to is this idea of stability, this concept of how we perform when we're stable versus how we perform when we're not stable. What does stability even look like? Well, when I ask this question, the first thing I do is I think about what it was like when I was not stable, when I was super manic, when I was in psychosis, when I was experiencing delusions and hallucinations, which impaired my focus, diminished my insight, affected my judgment in a negative way. And it just sent my life on an extremely negative trajectory. So that's the first thing that comes up when I hear the question posed of what does stability look like? And I contrast that with where I am now. I think about the fact that I'm returning to school and getting my education again, my higher education, so that I can hopefully get a job again, a really good paying job in the future. I think about the fact that I'm now exercising daily and starting to experience weight loss to various extent each given month. And I think about the fact that I'm taking up healthy hobbies like reading and watching YouTube, not just for entertainment purposes, but also for productivity purposes, and trying to delineate different ways of improving myself because there's so much self improvement information out there. It's all at our fingertips, so to speak. And so I feel like in this current modern age, there's really no excuse for not having like the access of information. Because, like, I think back to when I was in high school, for instance. I was there during the transition when we switched from notebooks to technology and laptops for doing homework assignments. And I didn't even have internet access at home. And in order to complete my assignments, I had to go to the library or to McDonald's to use their Wi Fi. Unfortunately, the latter was the more common route I had to take because the library hours, quite frankly, sucked. It wasn't open very often. And the McDonald's where I lived was 24/7 at the time. It switched after COVID. But I remember walking to McDonald's and connecting to their Wi Fi so that I could work on school assignments for advanced placement US history and the other classes that I was taking in any given school year. And so there's so much at our disposal. Information access definitely isn't something that, one person necessarily has, maximum amounts of and another person necessarily has none of. I feel like the playing field has been actually equalized because of technology. And so I want to transition though into, we were just talking about how, like, stability, what does it look like? And I talked about where I am now versus where I was before. I talked about healthy hobbies, right? I talked about the fact that I'm no longer manic and in psychosis. I talked about how I'm going back to school to get my education and the myriad of different things that I just discussed. But I want to talk now about an important mitigating factor in that journey and what's allowed a lot of this to transpire, and that is medication. Medication has played a paramount role in me having that comeback from a manic episode. It was medication that pulled me out of the depths of mania. And it's when I took medication like Abilify that I stopped experiencing delusions and hallucinations. And I started to recapture my intellectual faculties and was able to identify the different delusional things I was saying and doing during mania and compare them to the present moment where I was experiencing rational thinking. and I wasn't in this nonsensical mindset anymore. And medication, it had its negatives as well. It wasn't this one-way street where everything was beneficial. And of course, the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of negatives is the weight gain. If you look at my earliest videos on this channel, you'll see that I was not always exponentially overweight. That is not a like permanent phenomenon that I experienced. It's relatively new. At the end of my manic episode, I was approximately 180 pounds, and I very quickly reached a peak of 354 pounds in an extremely short amount of time. And as you can imagine, that took a huge toll on my self esteem. It greatly diminished my self esteem. It made me feel less confident in myself and in my capabilities. And so that's a negative that happened with medication. But overall, I would say that the pros disproportionately outweighed any negatives, the big negative being the weight gain, the exponential weight gain. Because what good would be being in shape be if I didn't have control of my central command center? What good would being in shape be if I was insane and my life was on a negative trajectory from a mental standpoint? I feel like regardless of whether I went on medication or not, the weight gain was going to take place simply because I feel like the depression was also a catalyst. It was that thing that transpired that caused these changes to take place and occur. The medication played its role without question, and I don't deny that. Without question, the medication did play a role in my weight gain. But I just want to reiterate this point that the medication enabled and empowered me to regain my sanity. It allowed me to put my life back on a positive trajectory. It allowed me to take gradual steps to rebuild my life as I knew it. And I think that's incredibly important to understand. And it's not like it happened overnight. It was by no means an easy task. I went on a wide assortment of different medications at different times, tried numerous different medication cocktails before I found the one that was the best fit for me. And so, my best advice to people out there who are kind of going through this trial and error process is to never surrender hope, because I do believe that if you don't give up, you will eventually find the medication cocktail that is the best fit for you. That's what happened with me. Like, there were medications that weren't particularly beneficial to me in achieving the goals I had outlined for myself, such as being less depressed, being less anxious, being more confident. And so I just kept an open mind as I tried different medications. And eventually I got on the medications that I'm presently on. And that allowed me to get back on a positive trajectory. And that brings me into this idea of surviving versus living. Because for an incredibly extended period of time, it felt like I was just surviving. I have to let my cat out of the room. I'll be right back. Thank you for your patience, one viewer who's currently here. And anyone else who watches this at a future period, if anybody else watches this at a future period. I was just talking about the contrast of surviving versus living. For a large length of time, it felt like I was just doing the bare minimum necessary in order to keep myself going, right? I was consuming what I needed to consume to stay afloat, probably consuming the bare minimum amount of water to stay hydrated. And I was only going outside when absolutely necessary, like to get to doctor's appointments, whether they be therapy or psychiatric. And beyond that, I wasn't leaving the house at all. I'm now referring to the months in the aftermath of my manic episode with psychosis. It was in those months where it felt like my life was on an extreme downward spiral. It was in those months where I felt like I had lost most, if not all, of the hope that I possessed. And it's because what happened during mania was so profoundly terrifying. Mania robbed me of my sanity. And being without your sanity is a recipe for disaster. It destroys friendships. In my case, it did that. In addition to that, it also disrupted my jobs. It took away my jobs, really, took away my education temporarily. Back on the right track there. But the point is, it caused this incredible disruption in my life. And mania, in the aftermath of the mania, I had to now think about how to approach life now that I had recaptured my sanity. It wasn't going to be this easy task. It's not a common sense task because, in many ways, it's like an injury when you suffer from mania. Because mania, it's been shown in various studies to affect like the amount of gray matter, white matter in your brain. And so it actually causes damage to your brain, and that takes time to recover from. And so that's something that has always deeply bothered me. But it's something to be cognizant of because at future periods, I don't want to go back into mania and then potentially unleash even more damage. I can mitigate, reduce, or eliminate the possibility of future damage by taking my medications assiduously and by putting in the effort to really achieve a healthy and meaningful life full of purpose. And that was one aspect of the medication conversation that I actually wanted to also talk about is this idea of effort. Because medication on its own is not sufficient, just like effort on its own, in many cases, not all, is not sufficient. Because if you suffer from a serious disorder like bipolar disorder, in my case, bipolar type 1 with psychotic features, it's a massive gamble to approach the journey of life, its hurdles, trials, and tribulations without having some form of medication in order to help you traverse that journey because of the risk that I previously enumerated in some 90 plus videos on my channel in the bipolar breakdown playlist, where I talk about mania, I talk about the aftermath, I talk about the depression, I talk about the recovery process, I talk about elements of my life where I'm now thriving. And so it's definitely been a chaotic journey. And there's a huge distinction between surviving versus living in the aftermath of a major manic episode with psychosis. For a long period of time, I was just doing the bare minimum necessary to survive. It took diligence and commitment over a set period of time before I was able to actually direct my attention and focus towards things that go beyond the scope of just the bare minimum, the bare essentials necessary to be successful and have a life lived with purpose. And what allowed me to get from that surviving to living state, there was a couple lessons I had to learn. One of those lessons that I had to learn was that it wasn't my fault that this happened, right? It's not my fault that I suffered from a severe brain disorder that affects approximately 2.8% of the population. Some studies estimate it to be an even lower percent of the population. And that recognition is imperative because I feel like when you place the accountability entirely on yourself, the fault entirely on yourself, it reduces your ability to get back on the task at hand. It diminishes your ability to pursue your goals. And in order to pursue your goals, you want to make sure that you're in a healthy mindset and that you are competent in your mindset. And so to get to that living stage, it took the medication and effort over a set period of time, and it took not acquiescing to the adversities of life. And it's easier said than done, but what empowered and enabled me to do that was this recognition that things were well in the past and this hope that they could be well again, even great again. And so another lesson I learned that helped me get from surviving to living is this idea that people are so preoccupied with their own lives, it's incredibly unlikely that they're thinking about you as much as you think they're thinking about you. And I think this is an especially important lesson for people who've traversed the chaos of mania, because in mania, we say and do a lot of things that we later on regret. We typically don't have the insight during that manic phase in order to realize what we're saying and doing is harmful to others and especially ourselves. And so, in the aftermath of a manic episode, they often have these thoughts of, I'm at fault for this, I'm to blame for this. They project all the blame onto themselves. And it's really unfortunate because it is something that was beyond their particular control. It's something that is medically diagnosed. It's something that there's a wide array of scientific research on corroborating everything that I'm saying right now. And so those are the two lessons that I would really draw people's attention to when it comes to this idea of escaping that surviving state and moving into the living state post manic episode. And one of the main benefits of that in the long run for me has been my changing thought patterns. I kind of first recognized this in around December of 2023. This would have been nearly 2 years after my manic episode had come to an end. And it was around this time that I started going to the gym because I had this burst of motivation, this epiphany that I needed to do something. Something would be better than nothing. Literally anything would be better than nothing. And when I started going out of my house for more than just doctor's appointments, whether they be psychiatric or therapy, when I started going to the gym for the purpose of losing weight and trying to derive as many mental health benefits as possible, I started to recognize this change in the way that I was thinking, right? When I first came out of mania, I had an overwhelming amount of racing thoughts about the things I had said and done during mania. And a lot of these were things of embarrassment, aspects of my mania where I was really just so out of touch with reality. And in the aftermath of the mania, it's particularly difficult to move on from what transpired because of that level of embarrassment. Looks like we got some viewers in here. See, Kenny says, I'm just trying to keep from gaining weight until about early to mid March or so. Okay. And Sneaky Squee, I see your comment here as well now. Hi, Tyler. Hello. Hello, Kenny. Hello, Sneaky. Yeah, I feel you, Kenny. My weight journey has been pretty good this year. I'm not trying to jinx anything though, so I don't want to, kind of toot my own horn too much here. But I'm experiencing lots of progress relative to other blocks of time in my life where I've said I was going to lose the weight. I will say that, at my peak, I was 354 pounds. And as of February 1st, 2026, I'm at 312. And we'll see where I can go by the end of this month. I'm not setting like a super specific goal of like, oh, I want to be below 300 by the end of February. Because then I feel like I'd be setting myself up for failure. There's going to be days where I can't do as much physical activity as normal. There's going to be days where I overeat. And just like today, for example, we had a massive snowstorm here. So I've had to do my steps goal inside my apartment. And just for context of how tedious and boring and dull that is, walking from one end of my hall to the other is about 17 steps. And I've done the math out for this. I have to do that about 294 times to hit 10,000 steps. And there's ways I've tried to make this easier and alleviate some of the stress that comes with that. Like I put on music. That's a huge factor in keeping me motivated and going forward with my steps when I'm locked indoors and isolated. It's kind of amusing to me how my problem a few years ago was being isolated and not wanting to go out to the world. And now my problem is I'm isolated and want to go out to the world. I would love to be outside again and walking with the tranquility of nature as opposed to being inside. Sneaky Squeeze says, have you listened to any good albums during your steps? So I've never really been a person, this might sound absolutely crazy to some or bizarre to some, but I'm not one of those people who like looks up an album and then listens like song for song through the album. I kind of just have like this diverse range of songs that I listen to that fall into pretty wide ranging categories of music. And I go through these phases where I like certain genres more than others. Right now I'm in like a rap hip hop phase. So I've been listening to artists like Polo G, Some lesser known artists, like one is called Snot, which is kind of a funny name, but he has some great songs that I enjoy listening to. I really enjoy the melodies of his work. With Polo G, I really enjoy the lyrics as well as the melodies. Polo talks a lot about like persevering, and he has like another lyric where he talks about his grandmother watching over him, and he could feel her spirit. And there's just, I feel like, a lot to benefit from that for someone like me who was very close to my grandmother and who's gone through lots of persevering moments in my life. What snot? Sorry, but I got the word snot stuck in my head now because it's just such a funny name to me to have as a rapper name. I would love to know the story behind why he has that as his rap name, but his music is good nonetheless. Sneaky, what I was trying to ask is, what songs have you been listening to? I'm curious to hear. What songs have any of you been listening to help you persist through your trials? Definitely interested in recommendations if you have any, but I don't just listen to rap either. I like kind of these like get into the rhythm songs like Eye of the Tiger. Another one I would place in that category. And I know this isn't an actual genre, but it's my genre of how I classify. I like Life is a Highway is another one that I enjoy. Thunder. And yeah, there's so much great music choices out there. There's no particular one song I listen to when I'm trying to do my steps inside for losing weight. I try to diversify it as much as possible so that things don't become mundane. Overall, though, the music has helped expedite the process a lot and kept me motivated because, like I said, doing your steps inside is extremely tedious. And it's a lot easier said than done when you're looking at doing like, I mean, think of that, walking back and forth down a hallway 294 times. Like, even if you break that up into multiple chunks over the course of the day, 50 times here, 50 times there, it still takes a really long time. As opposed to when I could do my steps outside, I just walk around the block a few times and boom, I got my 10,000 steps and I could just go back inside and relax for the rest of the day. Sneaky says, I'll check out Snot. Yeah, for Snot, I would recommend Moon and Stars. I'll put that in the chat. It's kind of like one of the top comments on the video, and I agree with it, is it's like the hood version of The Night We Met. And I like the melody of both those songs. And then there's also, can't think of what that other one's called. Yeah, well, there's a few good ones I listen. There's like 3 songs of his that I listen to. The other 2 just like come up on the recommendation whenever I hit Moon and Stars. So I've been listening to A Lovesick, a new album from the Happy Fits. I like the electric guitar. Ooh, I like the electric guitar in there. And I've been loving the new Bruno Mars single, I Just Might. Okay. I'll take both of those down and give them a listen. And if I see you in a future live stream or even in the comment section, I'll let you know what I thought of it. So Lovesick, that's from Happy Fits. Okay. And Bruno Mars, I Just Might. Okay. So that should be interesting. I will say, beyond the weight loss front, there's really been a lot of fear and excitement about the future on my end. Fear in the sense of when I returned to university this past fall of 2025, the first month and a half, things were phenomenal. Everything was going really well. I was successful in my classes, getting straight A's, and that hypomanic episode kind of hit me like a truck. And I will give myself credit where it's due. I handled that episode a lot more efficiently in a much healthier way than I handled my previous 6-month long manic episode. Like, that's actually the understatement of the century, that I handled this one better. And I think what enabled me to handle this better is I wasn't in like full blown mania yet. And I was able to spot it. The early signs, lack of sleep was the huge one. I wasn't sleeping, and I was really overwhelming myself, putting more on my plate than I could actually handle reasonably. And then, of course, there was also the fact that my mom was in and out of the hospital at the time, which created an environment of high stress. I think that semester was like 3 to 5 times that she got hospitalized. And one of the days was on her birthday, which really put me in a state of despair because I was just very worried with how frequently she was having to go to the hospital. And she actually just had a surgery recently too, but she hasn't been hospitalized as of late, which is a good sign. But I digress. Going back to just like this general idea of fear versus excitement, I'm excited too, though, because in the not too distant future, fall 2026, I'll get a second chance at cracking this puzzle of returning to university. Fall 2025 didn't go as successful as I would have liked, but I got another chance at it. And that's the great thing with life, is that we often have more than one chance to do something. I'm not one of those people who will say, like, speaking in extremes of like, oh, even if you're 110 years old, you still have plenty of time to go get a couple of PhDs. Like, probably at 110, probably the time limit has passed, right? But I would say by and large, for most people, it hasn't. Right? There was a story about an elderly woman where I go to school who just recently got her nursing degree, and she's in her like high 70s, low 80s. And she just got a nursing degree, and now she's going into the nursing field. So I do believe that for by and large, most people, it's never too late to achieve something meaningful in your life and make a positive difference in your life. One of the great challenges I had when I returned to school this past semester was kind of learning how to study again, which might sound absurd. So I'm like, what do you mean? Like, once you know that, you know it forever. You're either good at it or you're not. Well, when you're away for 4 years, it's a little bit different. I would say that I was always an academically high achieving student. But when you go 4 years being away from higher education, being away from education in general, which was the longest gap of time I've been away from education at any point in my life ever, you do lose some of your competency. You do lose some of your aptitude for doing things efficiently. And I had to relearn a lot of the routines and my ability to focus and direct my attention to the task at hand. And it wasn't easy. But like that first month and a half before the hypomanic episode hit, things were going, like I said, pretty well. And so I don't think studying is necessarily something that, like, studying efficiently is something that you ever like lose, so to speak. But it's something that does have to be relearned if you go an extended period of time being away from it. And I will say that with the classes I was taking, there weren't really many tests to study for to begin with. It was kind of largely like presentation based, which I think was in part because of this, like they're less on essays now and more focused on like presentations because of the rise and emergence of AI and chat GPT and this epidemic of students using AI to write their entire essay. And so with presentations, it's more like your ability to communicate and orate effectively and your ability to convey a point to an audience of people. And in some cases, you have to answer questions on the spot. So I didn't have too much direct experiences with having to relearn studying again either, based on the courses I was taking, just because they were so presentation heavy. But yeah, I'm not too worried about this idea of like getting back in the swing of things when I return. I feel like this past semester was a great learning experience. And going into this next semester, I have more tools at my disposal, more lessons that I've learned that will better equip me to have a more positive and successful experience this next time around. In the long run, I've mentioned on my channel how I'm deeply interested in attending law school. And the origins of that interest could be traced back to as far as when I was just a young little kid. Instead of playing outside, I would sit inside and I would watch the C-SPAN channel, which for those of you who don't know, I'm sure most of you do, is just like politics and lawmakers and giving speeches on the Senate floor, or congressmen and congresswomen arguing. To most people, that's incredibly dull and boring. And me as a 7 to 10-year-old kid, there's nothing I enjoyed more than watching C-SPAN. I enjoyed it more than going outside. I enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed playing video games. It was fun to me. I like studying the like speaking strategies that different politicians would employ. And as I've gotten older, I started to accumulate different rhetorical strategies of my own, been able to develop and apply them in my own life, inside and outside the classroom. And so law school has its origins in me being passionate about public speaking. And the other component of it is really wanting to make a difference. And this is something I've always had, but it's been particularly in the spotlight over the last few years, especially in the wake of my 6 month long bipolar manic episode. And that's because, I mean, my bipolar manic episode, it robbed me of my sanity. I experienced all those delusions and hallucinations and experienced firsthand what it was like to not have control of your own mind. And my heart really goes out to those who've gone through that experience and haven't had the degree of recovery that I've had. And I feel like that's the case for a lot of people. And so, where I feel like I can make a difference in this world is practicing Social Security disability law, helping people who have illnesses, whether they be physical or mental. But I'd personally like to specialize in mental illnesses because I feel like they're more neglected. They're might be like less likely to be picked up. Their cases might be less likely to be taken on by attorneys because they might be seen as lower probabilities of success in front of an administrative law judge. And so I feel like as someone who's gone through this experience of having a mental health disability that's greatly affected my life, that I can really resonate with these people, but also articulately communicate how mental health disabilities disrupt a person's life and how mental health disabilities don't define us, and how perseverance in the long run can make such a profound difference. And I feel like SSDI, Social Security, is something that can be highly beneficial to a lot of people out there. And just because you're on it, it doesn't mean you're on it forever, right? There's people who go on it temporarily and then get off it and go on to do various things. But in some cases, right, there's mental health cases that are so extreme where the expectation shouldn't be for someone with schizophrenia to go accomplish all the exact same things on the exact same timetable as someone who doesn't have schizophrenia, right? Because schizophrenia presents such a unique sense of challenges. And that's one of the negative habits I've tried to eradicate in myself, is comparing myself to others who haven't faced the same challenges that I've had, right? It wouldn't make sense for me as someone with bipolar type 1 with psychotic features to compare myself to someone who doesn't have a diagnosed mental illness. Or, some people would go as far as to say is like, I've never really experienced depression. Everything's gone extraordinary. Or they'll falsely equate like depression as something that's not necessarily what it actually entails. I think we got another comment here. Kenny, my obsessive compulsive traits were really bad in January and early February. I'm sorry to hear that, Kenny. Yeah, I've had a lot of obsessive compulsive characteristics over the course of my life. I think the primary ones were probably when I was in middle school and junior high. And I wouldn't go as far as to say as like perfectly evolved from them. But in my personal case, I'm fortunate that it's not as bad as it was previously. I am sorry to hear that though, Kenny, and I do sincerely hope things get better for you. If you don't mind sharing, what is there anything like particular about January and February that like kind of brought it out, or is it kind of just like that new year feeling? I won't persist in my questions if you don't want to answer it. Totally fine, but I'm just curious if you don't mind sharing. But if not, totally okay. So yeah, I mean, my appeal with law school is just I want to help other people. That's the bottom line of it. And I feel like being able to utilize my voice in that fashion would be so intrinsically rewarding, far greater than, making money or anything of that nature. Not that making money is a bad thing. I mean, hey, we need it for pretty much everything. Everything in this chaotic world. And there's some people look at me when I'm crazy when I say I want to practice disability law. They're like, really? Yeah, that's like the lowest paid field of law. You're going to get yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt to practice disability law? Yes, because there's more than just monetary benefits to things. There's more than just money in this world. And I feel like the intrinsic benefits, what I feel inside of, my heart feels far greater practicing something like that than I would, being stuck in some corporate law office in a tower. And I don't mean to speak about that with disdain, to people who do that and find passion in it, all the power to them. But I just don't see that being something for me. And he says, less sunlight could also be some unpredictability in my life. Yeah, I've heard a lot about how there's so many different benefits that one can derive and accumulate from sunlight, particularly on mental health. And interestingly, when I was in high school, one of the things I used to do, maybe I should do this again too. There's a sun mound at a park nearby to where I live, and I would go to this mound where the sun like shines perfectly onto, and I would just like take my shirt off and just relax and meditate in the sunlight, do deep breathing exercises, and not only get a great tan, but the mental health benefits I feel like are highly underrated when it comes to sunlight. There's just so many benefits that can be derived. It could also be some unpredictability. Yeah, that could definitely do it. Me, in my case, in my life, I would say I've been a pretty impulsive and unpredictable person in many different capacities at various points in my life. And these instances far predate me being diagnosed with bipolar, but are probably more common since being diagnosed with bipolar. And I think it just speaks to the nature of my illness. And I know this is different for different people, but in my case, it's just part of like having a mood disorder. And it's just one of the components of having that illness and one of the challenges that we're tasked with dealing with. And don't worry, everybody. I promise you, this is not sugary soda. This is diet soda. Not saying that diet soda is great either, right? That has a wide array of negatives as well. But I've been losing weight, and so I feel like drinking a glass of diet soda or two a day isn't the worst vice in the world, right? It could be a lot worse. And since I'm losing weight on my weight loss journey, that's what matters to me. Another challenge that really came with going back to school fall 2025 after being away from college for 4 years is just the fact that this is going to sound kind of ridiculous, but I mean, I was out of school for 4 years, right? Like, it's challenging to go back, especially as an older person, and seeing a bunch of people there in undergrad who are younger than you. And it starts to build up those feelings and sentiments of, oh, I should be done with undergrad by now. I should be done with law school by now. And I'm not even in law school. I'm still in undergrad. What's wrong with me? I mean, I'm so far behind all of my peers. And when I have that line of thinking, I just got to tell myself again, I'm dealing with a different set of circumstances than the people I'm comparing myself to. And so it's not really fair to project blame onto myself for where I'm at the present moment. And academic success with bipolar is definitely possible. It's well within the realm of possibility. I've experienced it myself. Even though I wasn't diagnosed with bipolar till 2021, I mean, I feel like I've always had it. I can't definitively prove it, but there's been so many moments and escapades from my life, past experiences, where I just look at them in hindsight and I'm like, yeah, that was clearly a case of me suffering from a mood disorder. And I know that because of the reading and research I've done on my illness in the aftermath of being diagnosed. And so I know that academic success is definitely possible, even with that illness. It's not outside the realm of possibility. And that's why I often say in my videos, we don't have to allow our illnesses to define us. There's still so many, magnificent things that we can achieve if we apply ourselves and if we find ways to navigate the challenges that present themselves to us as the product of our illnesses. I will say that when I was at my absolute lowest, I'm talking total rock bottom, I had my 6 month manic episode where I experienced delusions, hallucinations. And at the end of those 6 months, I had just been arrested and I was released on the condition that I receive a mental health evaluation. And so I went to get this evaluation, and I was again diagnosed with bipolar type 1 with psychotic features and severe mania. And I remember the medical note saying, like, Tyler is very obviously manic. And in my case, from a legal standpoint, I was fortunate that I was not found guilty and the charges were dismissed. There's plenty of cases out there where people suffered from the same mental illness as me and did far less than I did, who were convicted, found guilty, sentenced to jail, have a criminal record now as a result. And in my case, I was assigned a forensic psychologist, and that forensic psychologist concluded that I should not be held criminally responsible because I could not conform my behavior to the requirements of the law, given the mental defect that I was experiencing at the time of the incident being I got into a fight. Kenny says, maybe once the year of the horse begins, Vietnamese New Year, February 17th, things will get better. Maybe. Anything that keeps hope is important. Anything that can drive hope in yourself, instill hope in yourself, is worth it, even if it sounds absurd, even if it sounds like, so-called not normal. Like, we all derive hope from different places, and whatever keeps you motivated, all the power to you. And I'm a strong believer that not everything is like set in stone. I believe that we're not like sentenced to a purpose. We're given the tools and abilities to discover our purpose in this world by the grand architect of the universe. And a big part of it is patience too, right? There's different plans for all of us, and some of us are going to discover our passions at different times in our life. Some of us might know very early on what we want to do. Some of us might not find out till decades later. Some of us might not find the solution to a problem until after it's lingered and had so many consequences. But it's imperative that we never surrender hope. So wherever you can derive hope from, Kenny, or to anyone out there listening, watching, all the power to you. It's really what I got to say on that. So at my lowest, I survived the 6-month manic episode. I survived the legal consequences that emerged. I was not found guilty. The charges were dismissed because of the fight I got into due to the mitigating factor of mental defect, essentially insanity defense, which is incredibly rarely used. And it's also rarely successful. And in my case, it was successful. Even still, I look back with shame about a lot that transpired during my manic episode because it had very real consequences. I mean, just look at my weight, right? Compared to myself, my physique in earlier videos of mine, I went from 180 pounds to 354 at my peak. And yeah, I'm in the right direction now. I'm taking the right steps necessary to go in the right direction, and I'm moving to a better place. I was at 312 pounds when I weighed myself on February 1st, 2026. So many pounds lighter than I was at my peak, but that's just one consequence. Another consequence is that I spent 4 years out of school, and that has consequences of its own, like compiling on top of that, compounding consequences. Because being out of school for 4 years, as I iterated previously in the stream, it really took a toll on me. It created a deficit of learning where I wasn't able to learn as competently as I was before because of that time gap of being away. I lost jobs. I lost income, potential, and growth. Think about those 4 years. Imagine if I had been working during those 4 years, the amount I could have accumulated in savings and put into investments and stocks and 401ks and Roth IRAs. I didn't do any of that. I was too busy putting on weight, overeating, not exercising, trial and erroring different medications to try to find the medication cocktail that was the best fit for me. It took years to find out what the best medication cocktail was. And now that I have it, I'm able to more assiduously focus on the task at hand. And I'm grateful for that. But letting go of the shame that followed from that manic episode is a lot easier said than done. I was very embarrassed that I was referring to my friends and calling them Nazi agents. I was embarrassed that I lived in a frat house while manic. It kind of occurred to me like, why is it that I suffered from this bipolar manic episode, but nobody else in the fraternity house did? Nobody else in my 100-person plus college fraternity suffered from this, but I did. I must be worth less. I must be less valuable as a human being, and I should be ashamed of myself. And that shame, it's a difficult thing to navigate, and I was extremely hard on myself. I attribute a lot of that to why I gained weight. I attribute that to being the primary motivator for me putting on a lot of weight. And I do think that those overwhelming levels of shame that I experience in the long run have made me more resilient, made me stronger, more able and capable of adhering to the wisdom of President Calvin Coolidge. A saying I've always adhered to myself is, nothing in this world can take the place of persistence. And later on in that quote, it goes, persistence and determination alone are omnipotent. And what I love about that quote is it puts the power in our hands. It takes it away from this concept of destiny. Some people are destined for this and some people are destined for that. It puts the power of destiny in your hands and tells you that insofar as you are persistent and determined, you shape your own destiny. And this leads me to another quote, one by William Jennings Bryan. This is a man who ran for president multiple times, lost every time, and yet, as a failed presidential candidate, William Jennings Bryan said, destiny is not a matter of chance, it is a matter of choice. I do believe that it's within the power of all of us to affect meaningful, positive changes in our life. I believe that all of us are capable of building a better future for ourselves and that outcomes for our life are not predetermined. There's so much that is in our control for every one thing that's not in our control. And if we focus on the things that are in our control, the probability of us achieving the goals we outline for ourselves is drastically higher. So it was a slow rebuilding process of getting my confidence back to where it was pre-mania. Because that manic episode was exhausting, it drained me of my energy, and I felt like an incredibly incompetent person in the aftermath of it because I was embarrassed about the things I did. I was ashamed of the things I said to my friends and people that I cared very deeply about. And how do you become confident again after that? After you lose control of your mind? I mean, that's so embarrassing. I lost control of my central command center. And predating that diagnosis of bipolar type 1 with psychotic features, I had experienced monumental amounts of success. It's not like, I should have seen this coming moment. It really just hit me like a Mack truck. For everybody joining in, thank you so much for stopping by. My name is Tyler Adolfo. I am a mental health content creator on YouTube. I have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and it's greatly disrupted my life. And in this video, or live stream rather, I'm kind of just discussing some of the challenges that I've had to endure in the aftermath of my manic episode, and I'm relating it to present experiences of my life and what I'm dealing with now. Kenny, new comment in, says, I guess you gain your confidence one step at a time over many years. Absolutely. I'm a strong believer in gradual gains, right? Nothing worth having in life comes super easy. Nothing worth having in life is going to happen like overnight. It takes gradual gains, right? I didn't become morbidly obese overnight, for example. And so it only makes sense that it's going to take time and commitment for me to get that weight and extra pounds off. And yeah, I'm a strong believer in that. And I believe that gains compound. And the more gains you make, the higher probability of you making even more gains, right? It's like compound interest in a bank. That interest is going to continue to build. It's going to multiply, not just add, but multiply the gains that you experience. Like right now, in addition to getting my steps in and trying to expedite my weight loss as much as possible, I'm also reading currently, and I'm about to finish this book, but It's 1L by Scott Turow, and it's about a first year law student at Harvard University. And this was published in, I think, 1975. And so, as you can imagine, a lot's probably changed in the 51 years since this book was published. But even reading it, I can relate to a lot of the challenges that this first year student faced. And it's just super relatable and really enlightening about how challenging being a law school student is. And I'm reading it because I'm interested in law school and I want to instill myself with the kind of mindset that's going to be necessary in order to be successful. And I believe that small, gradual gains are what's going to prepare me best for that challenge. Oh, hey, Bucell, welcome, welcome. Got a comment here. Says, I can definitely relate. Hard to rebuild the confidence. I was so popular and happy, and then suddenly I had no friends and no popularity. I'm more confident now than before, though. I'm totally with you there. I like that you mentioned rebuilding confidence as it relates to popularity, right? In many senses of the word, I was popular when I was at UMass Amherst, when I was living in a frat house. I had seemingly hundreds of friends. I was part of a brotherhood of 100 plus people. I had hot chicks coming to my house 3 nights a week to party with us in the hundreds. And I just felt on top of the world in many respects. And the fact that I held multiple positions within that fraternity as well, pledge class vice president, chapter historian, social media manager slash public relations chair, it felt meaningful and it felt like I had a greater purpose in my life. There was more to the world than just myself, that there's a big world out there and it doesn't revolve around me. And being able to build those friendships meant a lot to me. But the other side of that is manic episode, right? The manic episode kicked in and I destroyed a lot of those relationships. So, as you mentioned, kind of experienced the opposite of that now, of having no friends, no popularity, right? Going into that junior year, I had a great paying job. I was doing phenomenal academically and I had hundreds of friends. It felt like I was on top of the world and I lost all of it. Every last bit of it I lost. And in this case, the losses happened rather speedily because during Mania, I was just acting totally antithetical to my character. I was acting in ways that were extremely out of the ordinary for myself. And even to this day, I'm coming to terms with and trying to rebuild and attempting to recapture some of those social connections that I've had since this episode. I'll just put it out there. This is the number of people from my fraternity who reached out to me to check on how I was. I'll let you try to take a guess first, and I'm going to tell you. None. And that was hurtful. And it makes you question, what extent were these really friendships to begin with? But at the same time, I don't project a lot of blame onto, the other people in the situation because I can understand where they're coming from as well. And title of the book, yeah, one, that's that. Yeah, it is deeply sad. It was deeply saddening to me, at least. And I had to reach out myself. I had to be proactive and reach out myself. Nobody reached out to me. Altogether, I want to say it was 6 or 7 members of my college fraternity that I reached out to get their perspective on what happened during my manic episode with psychosis. And hearing their perspective meant a lot. And they were all empathetic and understanding. But at the same time, it hurt that nobody thought to reach out to me. Like, hey, remember Tyler was saying and doing all these crazy things. I wonder whatever happened to him. I wonder if he's okay. I wonder if he's alive. Like, you would think that even like these basic things would be asked, but there wasn't really a great interest, apparently. I guess I hurt people that badly during my manic episode. And I mean, it is what it is. That's one of the banes of having bipolar disorder is that you say and do things that you later regret. You say and do things that can destroy relationships. You say and do things that have a lasting negative impact on your life, even well after the manic episode has concluded. Your comments making me laugh, Kenny. The title of the book makes me laugh. Yeah, it is kind of a interesting title, 1L. I mean, the full title of it, though, is The Turbulent True Story of a First Year at Harvard Law School. So the 1L is just one part of it. And this isn't the only book I'm reading. I just finished this book here the other day, Atomic Habits. There's a lot of extremely valuable concepts in here. Highly recommend it, by James Clear. It's sold tens of millions of copies, and lots of people recommended it to me. And I wish I had discovered that book sooner. I promise you, I'm not sponsored by them, by the way. If it seems like that, I'm not going to continue advocating, because I don't want people to think I'm like, I'm corrupt. I sold out everybody. James Clear reached out, and now I'm selling my soul and trying to sell my audience on buying a book. Another book I'm reading, I haven't been very diligent in finishing, though, is The Guide to Going Viral. And I'm trying to apply the lessons of this as it pertains to YouTube. I mean, don't get it wrong. The main reason I make these videos is because of the benefit that comes from disseminating insights and experiences of living with this condition. I've had countless comments of people saying that, you sharing your lived experiences has made me feel less alone, and has made me realize that there's hope out there for a better future. But any YouTuber who tells you that, oh, I don't care if I go viral, or, oh, man, I feel like they're downplaying how much they actually care about it. It might not be your highest priority, and it's not for me, but it would be great to get my message out to an extremely large audience of people, just based off the positive impact it's had on a niche audience of people. So, but insofar as I'm able to maintain this niche and community, I'm quite happy and composed. I'm content with it. But it's just an interesting book as well. So, Bucel says, I use an advanced chatbot, Gemini Thinking and Research, similar to ChatGPT, to get the latest research on bipolar and schizophrenia. It has helped me a lot. Just wanted to say that. Okay. Yeah, I'm familiar with ChatGPT, and I've heard Gemini. I think I've heard it mentioned before, but not as much as ChatGPT. So you say it's like an advanced chatbot. Is Gemini one that you have to like pay money for or subscribe to in order to use? And if you've used both, how would you compare it to like ChatGPT? Because I will concede that I've recently started using it. I don't use it for like writing essays or doing school assignments, but I'll use it for like allocating my time, creating a workout schedule that's sufficient for myself. And it is a very interesting technology. I think it will ultimately come down to, in the long run, how people choose, I can't talk today, how people choose to utilize that technology, right? It could be beneficial, it could be harmful. It really depends on how people utilize it. And it's kind of helped put my weight loss journey in perspective as well. I can't remember exactly what I asked it, but I was on ChatGPT, and I probably put more revealing information than I should have. But I said, like, hey, I had this bipolar manic episode, and I gained this much weight, and I reached a peak of 354, and I'm ready to start my journey again. Do you have any advice or tips? And, what would you say about my thoughts of being ashamed about this? And I gave a very like emotionally intelligent answer, combined with like drawing and extracting from various sources on the internet, which was pretty cool. And so since then, I've started using ChatGPT for similar tasks as that. Most of my interactions with it has to do with weight loss. But just to give an example, like I've also talked to it about the law school admission test and getting like study tips and getting its assessment on what degree, if at all, can a score be improved on that test. And It's given me links to resources, videos, articles talking about score improvements of other students and talking about the methods that they utilized in order to get higher scores. And I think it's really useful if you employ it the right way. And who am I to be the judge of what's the right way or wrong way? But myself personally, from an ethical standpoint, from an integrity standpoint, as someone who wants to learn as much as possible, I wouldn't use it for like school purposes. I'm never going to type like an essay question in there and have it written by ChatGPT because I would much rather write it myself. But let's see. So Gemini can be free, but if you pay, it is even better. Gemini paid version is more complex and takes a longer time to find the answer. Interesting. It double checks itself and uses a lot of time. I learned so much about medication and recent research on the cure of bipolar and psychosis. Interesting. So there's not a fee you have to pay unless you want the more advanced version. Okay. That's cool that it takes longer to answer. I mean, some people might be aggravated at that, but I can see the benefit of double checking and making sure you're getting the right information because I've seen stories of people in the field of law, for instance, attorneys who will ask ChatGPT to help them with their case. And I know this isn't Gemini, but just to give an example of an AI doing something wrong, and the AI will tell the lawyer, the attorney, cases that don't exist, like totally fictional cases. And the attorney then goes to court and says, "Oh, in this matter of, so and so versus so and so, the conclusion was this of the court." And then the judge has to call them out and say, "What are you talking about? That case never happened." So I think that's just an example. You have to really balance and know how to use the technology in a way that makes sense. And it is wild. Thank you. I can't imagine how embarrassing that must be to go into a court and you argue, "Oh, in this case," and it turns out the case is fictional. Like, I mean, it's okay to use AI for research purposes, but I just think it's probably smart to, based on the past history of AI, to use secondary sources to corroborate and substantiate what the AI is saying. Because the AIs have given false information to people before, and it's had harmful consequences on those people, even if their intentions were in the right place. Yeah, I think the purpose you're using it for, and I'm not trying to like sound like a judge here, I think it's a good use of it to, get more information on the research of it. I haven't thought about doing that myself. So I've talked to it about bipolar as it relates and pertains to like weight management and my weight loss journey. But yeah, that would be pretty cool to like see what else it could lead me to, what other information it could provide to me to help me become a more educated, better research person on bipolar disorder. So yeah, it's helped me construct a weight loss mindset that's beneficial to myself, one that is positive, one that is grounded in reason, and allows me to achieve my goals at my own pace and, in my opinion, expedite the progress that I've had. And progress is very important, no matter what it is you're pursuing in life. So I'm thinking now, like, about what a good day looks like, right? Compared to kind of the days I was experiencing in the aftermath of my manic episode. And the level of difference is insurmountable. Like, whew, it's like a whole different universe because I'll start off with what a good day is now, right? Because I feel like I kind of start off on the negative part too much and I want to mix it up a little and maybe start a little differently. A good day today, I get my 10,000 steps or more in. I'm making progress on the scale. I'm doing my daily reading. I'm about to finish this book with the funny title. Got like 33 pages left, I believe. And once I'm done with those 33 pages, I'm going to move on to finishing this, which I started but haven't got too deeply into. And then I'm also at the same time going to work on, this is Win Every Argument. So, as a lawyer, you're going to argue a lot. And I figured out it's maybe a good skill to learn how to win every argument, huh? It's probably promising more than it will actually deliver. But if I could even drive half of what it promises, that would be huge. So, a good day now, like I said, I'm hitting my step goal. I'm reading. I'm doing things that I enjoy. I'm forward thinking and putting my life in terms of the future and realizing that there is hope out there for a better future and recognizing that because of my past and achievements of the past, I'm capable of doing these great things again or even better things. Damien says, Tyler, you inspire me and your videos help me through some of my hardest times in life. Thank you. Damien, appreciate you. Man, that's awesome. And not that you've had hard times in your life, but that the videos have helped you traverse those hard times. I love hearing comments like that. Haven't heard too many recently, but I haven't been uploading very consistently. At the peak of my channel in like early 2024, when I was uploading daily for like 25 days in a row or so, I had, multiple videos hitting 1,000+ views and gained like a couple hundred subscribers in a month. And I think like 800 subscribers that year, which was like the bulk of the growth of the channel. I was getting lots of comments along the same lines. I haven't gotten too many since then. So, Damien, thank you for sharing that. It means a lot. I haven't seen one of a comment like yours in quite some time. So, and Bucell says he agrees. Yeah. So, thank you. Appreciate you. Appreciate you both. I've found a lot of wisdom in hearing other people's stories, and that's one reason why I want to do these live streams more. Is it does have a feedback loop that making long form and short term videos doesn't. Because with long form and short form videos, sure, people can comment on a specific point you made or on something totally different, or they could be a troll and say something awful, whatever it may be. It's not a constant feedback loop. Whereas with the live stream, I'm interacting with viewers in real time. And so if someone agrees or disagrees with a particular point I say, or has an insight or experience they want to talk about or share details of, they can do so without having to then wait for a response to me. Like, I just think the features of a live stream are really cool. So I'd love to keep these going and try to see kind of where it goes from here. And I feel like each live stream, at least in terms of like how I've been able to, how do I want to put this? It's become more successful in certain ways. And I'm not going by like viewer count of each live stream, but in terms of how I'm able to collect my thoughts and like progress over the course of a live stream compared to past live streams. This is my 5th one. And I think it's levels, eons better than my first one was. So yeah, that's your comment just honestly made my week. Means a lot to me. So I talked about what a good day looks like first, and now the negative. I apologize in advance, but I got to talk about both for comparison purposes. When I came out of my 6-month-long manic episode with psychosis, I, as you can imagine, plummeted into a deep depression. I was overwhelmed with feelings of fear, doubt, uncertainty, at times hopelessness. And it took lots of effort and medication to get out of that period of my life. But I feel like in many aspects, time itself was the biggest healer. Because when you go through 6 months of not having control of your sanity, 6 months of not being able to manage your central command center in a healthy way, and you've lost your intellectual faculties, you've lost the ability of insight and the ability to direct your focus to a task at hand. It's huge. It's a monumental impact. And with time, I was able to not rush myself. Many ways, a manic episode is an injury to the brain. I strongly believe that based off what I've read. It's a brain injury. Let's get to it because, it destroys matter inside your brain, which then takes time to rebuild. And every manic episode does that. It's not like, oh, some do it and some, no, every manic episode does. That's what the research says. And so in the aftermath of that, I was deeply depressed. I felt fatigued and exhausted. I had anhedonia, where things I previously enjoyed gave me no enjoyment anymore. And I just lacked the ability to experience any form of pleasure whatsoever. And again, I it's cliche, but time was a huge healer for me. It was with time that I came to learn some profound lessons. Like, one of the things that helped me cope with this idea of embarrassment and shame and guilt is just the fact that recognizing that the fact that people are so preoccupied and busy with their own lives, it's extremely unlikely that they're thinking about you as much as you think they're thinking about you. And that was huge for me. It was like an epiphany moment for me, because I had been thinking constantly about how, these things I said and done were so extraordinarily embarrassing, and they're probably laughing at me and ridiculing me so scornfully. And, I'm not in the room, so I don't know exactly what they're saying, but I know they're saying something. But with time as a healer, I was able to realize that it's just really not true. Sure, there's without question been moments during my manic episode where people probably confided to one another, not probably, but did say, you know what, Tyler's acting really crazy. I haven't seen Tyler act like this before. I wonder if Tyler's okay. Did you hear what Tyler said the other day? Did you see what Tyler posted on Instagram? Tyler got banned from Snapchat the other day. Tyler just posted in the town forum on Facebook. It was so crazy and ridiculous. And did you see it? Oh, you didn't see it? Well, here, let me show you. I know all those things happened because hundreds of people witnessed my manic episode either in person or online. And so, of course, these interactions took place. But in the long run, like, let's say a month after my episode, when I wasn't saying and doing these things anymore, how realistic is that in each of the 30 days after my episode ended that they're still talking about it? In that, if there was anybody doing that, which I don't think it would be the majority of people, but anyone who would be doing that, not only do they have very low emotional intelligence to be making fun of and deride somebody for going through such hardship, but I think it speaks more about themselves and their own insecurities that they would be focused on that. And I don't think it speaks to the majority of what people are doing or feeling. So the conclusion in that is just that time has been a huge healer. And that lesson in particular is what helped me recognize and appreciate that point. Thank you, everyone, for joining me on this stream. I'm not ending, I'm just welcoming in new people who came in, but I appreciate you being here. My name is Tyler Adolfo. I make mental health content primarily, talking about my illness with bipolar disorder. And in this live stream, it's really anything goes. All right. It's Tyler Talks, but I'm just kind of interacting with viewers here, and there's no really a roadmap of where we're going here as far as it pertains to the title of kind of like what's transpiring in your life or what's transpiring in my life. Insofar as it fits the title, I mean, feel free to share anything or whatever may be going through your mind in the comments, and I'll check it out and read it as soon as I see it. But I suppose since this is happening, man, I really can't talk to that. Since this is happening on the medium of YouTube, I suppose I'll kind of talk about why I'm on YouTube. Why is it that I keep making videos? I do have a lot of them right now. It's in the realm of 400 plus videos if you count my long form and short form. And I haven't counted them manually, but YouTube tells me how many videos I have on the channel. And it's 400 something. And this is my 5th live stream. So why exactly am I doing this? Well, the reasons have changed over the years. When I first started this channel, if you watch my earliest videos, you'll know very quickly that my original purpose with this channel was simply to use it as a documentation ground to highlight memories from my life, particularly high school and college. And I created this amidst the pandemic of 2020 with coronavirus, where lockdowns had begun, and I needed something to pass and occupy my time because it was extremely boring being locked inside. It was very depressing. And I started off with kind of just making videos, uploading content of my past. And that changed over time. I didn't stick to a consistent upload schedule. I had less than 100 subscribers at the time. And a huge shift and evolution of the channel was in 2022 after my 6-month long manic episode ended. It was at this moment where I was starting to feel this desire to kind of put myself out there and communicate to the world. And I didn't do so originally with mental health content. Interestingly, I actually started off with just making reaction videos. And if you look on my channel, you'll see a playlist called like George Carlin reaction videos. I have a few other comedians on there, but George Carlin, by far, I did the most videos on because he was my favorite. Not sure what your thoughts are on George Carlin. If there's any stand-up comedians out there that you'd recommend, please share in the comments. I'd love to check them out and give them a listen. But I started making reaction videos to kind of just cope with the stressors that came with that manic episode and the depression that subsequently followed. And slowly but surely, the channel picked up more subscribers through the reaction content. And that's what brought me from about 100 subscribers to like 250-ish subscribers. Most of them were George Carlin viewers. And I'm not sure to what extent any of them interact with my mental health content today, because it is completely different from the content I was making about George Carlin. But hey, it was a time period in my life that was important, and I'm happy to have them here on this journey, regardless of how many are still kicking it here. Then I put a mental health video up one day, and I believe the first one I did was I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder X amount of days ago. And in it, I just talked about my journey from being diagnosed to where I was at the moment. And that video did surprisingly better than I thought it would, because I wasn't a big channel at the time. The majority of my viewers had come from reaction videos or from like high school and college funny skits that I uploaded. And so for that video to perform pretty well, it spoke to a lot of people and people resonated with it. So I figured, maybe I could do more of this. And it made me feel good to get that off my chest of, I just went through this incredible experience and I shared it with the world so that other people can either relate to it or draw some insight from it. And the fact that both of these things happened meant the world to me, and it felt very intrinsically rewarding. So I started uploading more, and that brings us to where we are today. That one video about bipolar disorder, I now have like 95 videos on my channel about bipolar disorder. And now getting into live streaming. This is my 5th live stream for those of you who are just joining in. Appreciate each and every one of you being here. For those of you who are just coming in, my name is Tyler Adolfo. I make mental health content on YouTube primarily. Currently on a weight loss journey. I've gone from 354 to 312, working on getting back down to 180. Maybe even a little bit lower than that. We'll see where the journey takes us. Yeah, so the reason why I'm making YouTube videos has kind of changed, but ultimately the reason I continue to do so today is because I know it's making and having a positive impact on other people. And that in turn is highly beneficial to my mental well-being. It's really helped me kind of like process the events of my life too. Being able to go back to a video I made about mental health in early 2023 and compare it to one I made in early 2026 is huge. The difference is insurmountable. Being able to observe what I was like in that state coming out of mania compared to where I am now after years of medication, effort, diligence, and commitment, time being the greatest healer through that recovery process, seeing that is motivating to me. to know that it's proof to me that there's a better future out there, that there's a bigger picture in this grand scheme of life. We're not defined by any one particular moment. That 6 month long manic episode I experienced does not define me. It's not a life sentence. There's plenty of people out there. There's a plethora of success stories of people with bipolar disorder succeeding in the fields, medical field, the legal field, going on to achieve meaningful, big things in their respective lives. And there's no reason to diminish my self esteem and my self belief because of that one moment of my life. And that's where YouTube's really helped me process life and put things into perspective. Really, what I hope people kind of take away from my channel, no matter what video it is just hopefully, in some sense, maybe not repeating some of the mistakes that I made. In another sense, making people feel less alone and helping people draw wisdom from the lived experiences I've gone through. Damien says, yeah, bro, I'm slowly rebuilding my life, and watching you do the same thing is inspiring. Hey, Damien, all the power to you, man. I appreciate you watching, and thank you for sharing your comment earlier about how it's helped through some of your hardest times in your life. It's a challenge, without question. Any mental illness is a challenge. Bipolar disorder in particular, I mean, it affects 2.8% of the global population. That's what many studies estimate. Some say it's even lower than that. And trigger warning, but 20% of people with this condition successfully end their lives. And that's a shocking and terrifying statistic, at least it is to me, as someone who has a past history of thinking about, oh, it'd be better if I wasn't alive, or thinking along those lines, especially in the wake of my manic episode in the early stages of my recovery. Being able to know that I'm not alone in this journey, being able to see stories of other people get through their hardships and rebuild their lives, it's inspiring. So, Damien, please know that you inspire me as well. I'm glad to hear that you're rebuilding things in your life. It's never over until it's over, my friend. So I'm glad that watching me is helping in some degree help you, but ultimately it comes down to the work that you do. And I'm highly confident that you can handle any challenge that comes your way, because people who can handle mental illness can truly take on anything in this world. I ardently believe that. I will say that I mentioned how in 2024 the channel experienced kind of like rapid growth. There were a lot of people commenting on similar lines to what you said, that they were kind of like in that process of rebuilding, or something similar. And the growth of the channel has been a lot slower since then, so I don't see comments like yours as much anymore. So whenever I do see them, it kind of has a greater impact than they once did. So thank you. Busel says, I learned a lot watching you. What stood out the most to me was when you reacted to your own manic episode. Not many videos like that on the internet. Yeah. Interestingly, so I think you're referring to I forget the titles, the exact titles of the videos, but for those who are watching and aren't familiar with what we're talking about, I have a few videos I uploaded to my channel reacting to videos I filmed while manic. And I have quite a few of them. The first two did really well, got a couple thousand views a piece, I believe. And then the ones after that kind of trickled off and got, 500 or less, but still pretty good relative to the size and performance of the channel overall. And what really intrigued me about these videos is the amount of people who found it intriguing. They're just like, wow, it's really cool to see a video of someone who lost their mind and is on camera ranting, thinking they know everything and anything and about the world. And to see that person now in a healthy stage react to how they were acting, it's incredibly intriguing. And I've had comments along the lines. I've had a comment before where someone said like, hey, I saw your video where you were talking like John F. Kennedy and thought you were related to the Kennedys. And I'm going to show it to my college class so they get an idea of what it looks like when someone's bipolar and manic. I'm like, wow, that's absolutely awesome. No, Tyler Adolfo is in college classrooms. So the video of me reacting to manic episode has been played in front of at least one college classroom. And who knows what other impacts that it's having. And I've had people from my former university discover me through my YouTube channel. I won't say names, but people who I went to school with at UMass Amherst who found my channel and have told me, like, keep doing what you're doing. You're inspiring people. You're making a positive difference. I've had students from my university who attended there years after I left send me emails speaking in effect about kind of what I'm doing with the channel and what video they saw of mine. And so it's always very fascinating to me that that's a question I love when people answer that question I kind of have in my head of, what was the first video you saw of me, or, what stood out the most to you? And so I'm glad you picked that one, Bucel. Those videos were, it was this weird combination of trepidation and excitement in making those videos. I was afraid because, I act so, like in such an embarrassing way in those videos. And so you can understand surely why I was like hesitant because, do I really want to put this out there? What if an employer sees it someday? But what prevailed over that line of thought is that this could benefit a lot of people. This could be a learning lesson. This could teach a lot of people. And in effect, I was right because it ended up being showed in at least one college classroom, which is pretty cool. Vicel says, you went into so much details and it had a lot of content on you reacting. Yes, those videos could example be used as a presentation for psychiatry students. Yeah, I totally agree. And I'm glad I'm not just tooting my own horn out here and that you agree with me there. I do feel like it's an interesting insight because there's not a lot of content out there of people reacting to their manic episodes. I'm sure if you look hard enough, you'll find videos of people being manic because, there are a lot of people with bipolar disorder. But how many of those people have then gone on to successfully recover and, more specifically, make content talking about those dark chapters of their lives where they lost control and were out of touch with reality? It's huge. And I still am confident that those videos are going to, pick up steam at a later time. The engagement metrics on them are really high. Relative to the rest of my channel, I don't have access to like other YouTube channels, analytics or data, so I can't really say how it performs relative to them. But the reacting to videos I filmed while manic series on my channel did really well. Like the audience retention rate is really high on those. They got lots of comments and engagement, lots of support. And, I just hope, I have confidence that it's going to be pushed out by the algorithm again at some point, because at the end of the day, bipolar disorder is not going away. It's still going to be here lingering. It affects 2.8% of the global population. And it will almost certainly be here long after I'm gone. And that's one thing that's also very fascinating to me, is this idea that this library of videos I've created, these 400 plus videos, 95 or so of them being about bipolar disorder, 60 plus of them being George Carlin reaction videos, and then these videos documenting my experiences in high school and college. These will be here long after I'm gone. If I passed away tomorrow, and I hope I don't, these 400 plus videos will still be out there in the database of the internet for people to watch, and they'll continue to accumulate views. And you never know, 30 years from now, some celebrity might see my reacting to videos filmed while manic and link to it and be like, oh, hey, I have bipolar, and check out this person who made this experience talking about his bipolar from 2023 or 2024. And so you never know what's going to happen as far as content performance. I have had videos in the past pick up lots of steam long after they were published, even though they initially didn't perform particularly well. So yeah, comments like that be so. I'll tell you right now, they help me survive, and I believe they're going to help me thrive because they're the comments like yours, comments like Damien's. They do build my momentum. They keep me going. They make me realize that I'm capable of having a positive difference in the world. And one of the hopes that I have with the content, like reacting to videos I filmed while manic, is that other people will see that content and feel intrigued enough, motivated to put out similar content of their own. So I won't be the only one out here reacting to videos I filmed while manic, but there'll be scores of others out there saying, you know what, I'm going to take that leap. I saw Tyler talk about it. I'm going to do it. And yeah, I just sincerely hope that other people out there do it and do it better than I did. Like myself, I don't have much knowledge of editing, for instance, and that is a huge hindrance to the growth of the channel. If I edited my videos more effectively and were able to use, production qualities that maintained audience attention, then my videos would be pushed out to a lot more people, impact a lot more people. So I hope that with other creators, as ones emerge, that they're able to make use of the skill gaps that I have. They're able to use their knowledge that I don't have to have an even greater impact than I'm having. And at some future period, I'll familiarize myself better with video editing. I do have videos on my channel where I've edited, but they're from years ago and they're not exactly phenomenal quality level of editing. And at this present moment in my life, I feel like the raw, unfiltered, honest vlogs of me just venting are kind of more valuable than it would be if I were to just do 40 cuts of me talking over the course of 8 minutes. And yeah, it's definitely a learning curve though. Talking to a camera is a lot different than talking to people. The main thing is the feedback loop that exists or doesn't exist. With a video, there is no real time feedback as there would be in a conversation. So, like right now, this is an exception because in this live stream, talking and viewers are commenting live and I could respond to them live. But with long form and short form videos, it's kind of a one road street for the most part because I say my piece over the course of 10 to 15 minutes, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but people will then comment and I'll get to those comments eventually as I see them or when I feel the motivation and urge to log on to YouTube and respond to them. And there's not that constant feedback loop though, like exists with in-person conversation. When you're talking to a person in real life, you talk for a little bit and then the other person talks for a little bit. Or if you're talking with someone who really loves the sound of their own voice, then you'll talk for a little bit while being interrupted. And then they'll talk a little bit while you listen. And that's just how it works. I feel like my channel has kind of been a case study in some sense where I'm documenting growth as opposed to perfection. Right? If I was a perfectionist, then I would have graduated undergrad right now. If I was a perfectionist, I would at minimum be in law school right now working towards my Juris Doctorate. If I was a perfectionist, I would have never had this 6 month long manic episode. I never would have put on all the weight that I've had. I never would have destroyed those relationships with hundreds of my friends. I never would have lost those jobs. I never would have been expelled from my university. I never would have gotten arrested. All these things that transpired. If I was a perfectionist, they never would have happened, but I'm not. I'm learning, I'm growing. I'm just trying to make my way through this chaotic world one day at a time, learn where I can, benefit where I can, help those I care about, help myself. And when you have a mental illness, it's all the more challenging. And I sympathize with that greatly. I feel like since being diagnosed, I have a much greater emotional intelligence. And there comes this question kind of where I'll say to myself, well, I feel like I should be further than others, or I should be further than where I am relative to the performance of others. It's like I should be graduated from undergrad by now. I should be an attorney by now. But it's not realistic because that the gravity of the situation I went through, the calamity was at an all-time high. These were tumultuous times, right? The trials and tribulations that I endured goes without saying that they were easy. So when things happen where I go back to college and I'm older than everybody else and these questions come to mind, it's a matter of not being too hard on myself. It's a matter of putting things in perspective and recognizing that I am one of the 2.8% of people globally who have this illness. Not a lot of people have it. And it's not fair to myself to compare myself to people who don't have it because it's a totally different set of circumstances and challenges that they have in their own lives. That's not to say anyone without bipolar disorder doesn't have challenges. Of course they do. But the challenges I have are unique to myself as someone with bipolar disorder. And it's much better to focus on growth and longevity as opposed to the standards of comparison that we draw with others. That's just my viewpoint. And that goes without saying that there is this like emotional weight on my shoulders about not having finished my education. But that emotional weight, it's necessary in a sense because that necessity is what's driving me to go back. That necessity is what will ultimately allow me to go back and accomplish what I've set out to achieve. It's what got me back in the classroom to begin with. And it's just a matter of finding balance and not allowing those emotional weights to constrain me from progress completely. Balancing school with mental health is an enormous task. I learned that the hard way my 6 month long manic episode junior year. I learned it again when I had a hypomanic episode this past fall. From my experiences, from my lived experiences, I've been able to develop a degree of resilience that I never thought possible in myself. I've been able to become a stronger and wiser person. And in many senses, I guess you could say I kind of like grieved the person I was during mania. That's an interesting way to describe things. I would say so myself. I've said before, I thought a part of me died when I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And what I kind of mean with that, what entails that line of thinking is this idea that I had to mourn what I had lost because I was not the same exact person anymore. And I'm never going to be the same exact person that I once was. I have to carve out a new path on this new journey of my life. And that shock of exhaustion that comes after mania ends, like where you're just completely drained and you feel like you can't do this anymore. You struggle to find a reason to wake up and get out of the house or to get out of bed. All of these have impacts. All of these affect your mental psyche. They certainly affected mine. And I'm always going to have some degree of shame about the things I've said and done during mania. But I don't have to let them define me or chart the course of my life. I don't have to let them write the future chapters of my story, which in my view is only just getting started. There's that quote by Winston Churchill: "This is not the end. This is not even the beginning of the end, but rather it is an end to the beginning." And that's how I feel about my life. I mean, I'm 28 years old. I had a lot of success at various points in my life, mostly academic, but that's okay. There's a strong correlation between academic performance and long-term success, financially and being happy. That's an important kind of success that I feel like lots of people neglect or downplay the value of. Bucel says, I can relate with about everything you're saying. Well, thank you, Bucel. Appreciate you. That's one of my goals here is just to relate, resonate, share my insights and perspective on what I've gone through and benefit from learning the perspectives of others and knowing that what I'm doing is having some degree of improvement in my own life and also potentially positively impacting people in their own respective lives. Even if it's on a nominal scale, it's still an immense impact on myself and means the world to me. The one last thing I wanted to talk about pertains to mania, and not sure if anyone in the audience can relate to this, but it has to do with memory gaps and filling in those gaps long after your mental health episode with mania has concluded. This kind of putting the pieces of the puzzle of your past together. Because this is something where I've experienced a reemergence of memories in the beginning of my recovery, towards the middle of my recovery, towards the end of my recovery. In the beginning, it was kind of these experiences where I would pull out my phone that I had used during mania, and I would see these garrulous paragraph after paragraph, essay length texts that I have sent to my friends, to members of my fraternity, to members of my family. And I would see things I said and think, wow, I forgot all about that. How embarrassing. Or I forgot all about this. How embarrassing. I can't believe I said this. I can't believe I did that. But I said it. I did it. It says so right here in the text. It wasn't anyone else who sent it. I mean, it was a different person in my brain in a way, right? But it was my physical form that said it. Even if it doesn't resonate with my soul, I said it. I did it. And so there was a lot of rebuilding memories from those memory gaps. And that's one of the most painful things for me is having those epiphany moments where I just remember things suddenly, and it's really challenging and it's extremely difficult to take that in and process it in a healthy way. Sel says, definitely, I think about that a lot. A therapist told me to write about every memory from the past and write down new memories if they pop up. Interesting. So when your therapist tells you that, I want to make sure I'm understanding right. When they say to write down new memories, do they mean new memories that you suddenly remember from the past? So say if you have memory A, memory B, memory A is one you remember. Okay. I just want to make sure I understood that right. Yeah, that could be an interesting thing to do it. That could be an interesting way of dealing with it and processing it for sure. I have one video on my channel where I actually reacted to journal entries that I wrote while manic, and there weren't many of them. So I didn't do a whole lot of journal entries while I was manic, but I had about 3 of them. That is one of the most challenging videos for me to watch. Another one that's very challenging for me to watch, though, is when I appeared before the local board of town selectmen while I was in a full-blown manic episode with psychosis. And I was advocating on behalf of myself to get appointed to a position in the local government. And while I was manic, the town selectmen voted and confirmed me and appointed me to the town economic development committee. Blows my mind that happened. Still to this day, it's just such a shock to me. I can't believe it. Damien says, I lost 80% of memory from my episode. I'm thankful for it, but when something triggers, remember something, I get a little PTSD. Yeah, I totally get that. There's kind of it's hard for me to place an exact percentage on mine in terms of which ones I remembered immediately after coming out of mania versus which ones kind of emerged later on. But for me, if I had to place an approximate percentage, I would say it was about half and half, where half of them I remembered it vividly, immediately. Other ones kind of emerged later on. And that is something I've thought about, is what benefit, if any at all, would it be to just not remember any of it at all? And for me personally, I feel like I learned a lot about myself from those moments of mania. And it's taken time to get to that point where I'm at, where I feel like I can look back and say, you know what, there's some positives that came out of this horrible experience. But it's true. It's made me more resilient. It's made me more insightful. It's made me more emotionally intelligent. And these are characteristics that can go a long way in terms of success in the world if you apply them correctly. You can, there's a fortune cookie saying that I read many years ago, and it said, you can always make the best of a bad situation. Manic episodes are a pretty bad situation, but you can make the best of them. Damien says, yeah, it was more like 50% to be honest. 80 is a lot. Yeah, I feel like 50 and 80 are both kind of a lot, but 50 is where I would place it for me. And it wouldn't surprise me if there's people out there who've kind of forgotten everything. It might be like, I'm not a psychologist or like brain expert or anything, but it might be like a natural response to experiencing trauma to try and find ways to alleviate the stress of it. And one way of doing that is by just like kind of forgetting altogether. I'm not sure if that makes sense or not, but just something I thought of. Busal says, I hate when the most embarrassing memories of my manic episode come up, or if I see people in public that witnessed embarrassing moments. Yeah. So I haven't experienced too much of the latter of people like in public witnessing every embarrassing moment, just because I'm no longer on my old college campus. And even if I was, they're all graduated by now. It's been 4 or 5 years since that manic episode started and ended. If I had returned to college, and this is in a way like one of the benefits, how I was just saying, make the best of a bad situation. Suppose I wasn't expelled by my university. Suppose I was still at UMass Amherst living on campus. I would have had to go about campus, go about my day with all my former fraternity brothers. I mean, they're fraternity brothers again because I got reinstated, but at the time I was expelled. At the time when I was expelled, like imagine having my fraternity brothers walk by me and, possibly ignore me or laugh at me or have something mean to say just because of what I was going through. I feel like that would have been a hardship in itself. Seeing professors who I sent crazy emails to. Uh, there's a lot of negatives that could have happened. The change in environment helped a great deal, I feel like. That's what I was trying to get at right there. But yeah, I'm not a fan of when my embarrassing moments come up either. I've said in past videos that having humor is helpful in recovery, but self-deprecation can only help to an extent. At the end of the day, we have to be nice to ourselves. We can't be too hard on ourselves. We can't beat ourselves up forever. And we have to realize this wasn't our fault. The road to recovery is long and arduous, but recovery is attainable. Setting goals for ourselves that are reasonable can help shift our mood, our attitudes, our approach to the world, help us recognize that we still have a purpose regardless of the hardships we've experienced in the past. Help develop some perspective about how to approach things going forward based off lessons we've learned from our past. So I want to thank everyone for tuning in to this stream. Just wanted to provide some life updates and talk a little bit about the experiences I had with my bipolar disorder manic episode and the recovery process that followed. I hope that you found this beneficial or insightful in some ways. Had a lot of nice comments and interactions this live stream, and I greatly appreciate everybody for tuning in. I'm going to get back to reading. Like I said, I have about 33 more pages of this funny worded book to read, 1L. And yeah, I'm not sure what I'll do once I finish those last 33 pages, but I'll find something. And I hit my step goal for the day, so proud of that. Got this live stream done. Proud of that. Thank you all for watching, everybody. Damien says, thank you, bro. These lives are dope. Hey, Damien, appreciate you. Thank you. You sell, appreciate you. Thank you. Everyone else here, if there's anyone here who's here but hasn't commented, I thank you for being here too. Appreciate each and every one of you. And as always, love, light, and tranquility to all.